Okay, so for the tessellation project, you're gonna need a pencil, which I'm using a pen so that you can see, a thing of tape, a ruler, and I purposely bought these clear rulers because they're perfect for this project because you can see through them. And then you're gonna need a pair of scissors. You are cutting out small shapes today, so if smaller scissors are easier, no one is going to make fun of you for that. They actually may work a little bit better, but you can use either size. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna line up the ruler on the edge. I need to make a vertical line and a horizontal line, but I wanna make sure that I'm actually using my ruler and lining it up with the edge and not just drawing a straight line randomly. And I'm gonna use those lines in a minute. So I'm gonna line it up perfectly with a side. So I'm doing the left side, and then I'm gonna drag my pencil down the middle. So now I have a vertical line, and then I'm not gonna turn the note card around or the index card around. I'm gonna put my ruler on the bottom edge and make sure it's perfectly lined up. Hold the ruler down, and I'm gonna drag my pencil across to make my horizontal line. Okay, so now I have to make two shapes. The shapes, you don't want to make the shape super bumpy or zigzaggy because it's harder to cut that out. And obviously the shapes aren't going to be super big. When you cut out the shapes, you cannot trim the shapes, and you don't want to rip it out of the index cards. These are all very, very important things. So if it's easier to just draw simple geometric shapes, you can do that. We've been talking about geometric shapes. But if you're feeling a little bit more risky, you can also do some organic shapes. So I'll do one of each just to show you. So one of them has to be on the horizontal line, one of the shapes, and one of them has to be on the vertical line, which means they're going to be kind of catty corner from each other. So I'm gonna draw a geometric shape on this line. And when you draw your shapes, you wanna keep your shapes away from each other, and you want to keep them away from the corners of your card, but you also want to make sure that line is in your shape, and you'll see why in just a minute. And then I'll draw an organic shape on my vertical line, okay? Inside those shapes, I'm also going to draw an arrow across. So it's pointing across because that's going to be very important in a minute. Now I'm going to pick up my scissors, and I'm gonna cut it out. And I'm purposely going to miss the line to show you that it doesn't matter. When you're cutting, you wanna try to cut the smoothest line that you can cut so you don't have zigzaggy parts, because you are going to have to trace around those shapes in a minute. And so if they're very zigzaggy or rough the way you're cutting, it's gonna make it harder to trace. Okay, so one of them I cut right on the line, and one of them I didn't. But even if I miss it, I'm not gonna trim it. It should perfectly fit back into your index card, okay? Just like a puzzle, right? Now, the reason that I drew arrows on here is because I have to now make that shape go across. So at this point, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna break off some tape, and I'm gonna break off about like 2 or 3 inches. And I'm gonna use my ruler to do this because I don't have an edge to my table, but I normally put this on the edge of my table so that I can just pull these pieces off as I need them. So I just tear a bunch of pieces, and I try to make them kind of small because you wanna make sure they're on the shape itself and not on the edge. You don't want it to interfere when you're actually tracing the shape. And I'll explain what that means in just a minute. So now I'm gonna go across. So I have to make sure that it perfectly lines up. That's why I did those lines and added them on there. If it's overlapping the shape, you don't want to tape it down, okay? So you're literally gonna perfectly line it up so there's no gaps, and you wanna make sure those lines line up. Now, if you can see, I'm holding it down with one hand. I'm taking my dominant hand, which for me is my right hand, and I'm adding the tape with that. And again, I don't want the tape to kind of go over that shape, and I don't if that happens, you don't want to cut it because then you're cutting away from the shape. So now I'm gonna make sure it's also on the back. I'm gonna flip it over and I wanna make sure that it's taped down on both sides. We don't want those shapes wiggling around when we're tracing them. Okay, so now I have my other shape. So I'm gonna fit it in, I'm gonna slide it across. And now on this shape, I happen to have all these blue lines that I can use, and I can use those to help line up my piece too, okay? Hold it down, put the tape on here. If your tape does overlap, like say it goes like that, I would peel back the tape and then reposition the tape. That's the great thing about masking tape is you can peel it back and reuse it. And then I'm gonna tape it on the back. Okay, now I'm going to write my name on my tracer and I'm ready for the next step.